Hi everybody, welcome to Stamping with Melva. I'm Melva Peters and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in British Columbia, Canada. And I'd like to welcome you to my video tutorial. Today I'm sharing a technique that I'm not sure what it's called. I kind of call it the embossing pop. I don't know, something like that. So I'm using a background image and then I'm going to use white embossing powder on it and then use my blending brush to pop the image by adding ink with the blending brush. Long-winded story, a long-winded description of what my card is today. So it features the Daisy Garden stamp set, which is in the Stampin' Up! Annual catalog. And I shared this card as well as the written instructions and measurements and the supply list as part of the International Highlights blog hop that went live today. So I want to welcome you all to my video. If it's the first time joining me on YouTube, thank you for finding me and welcome. And if you haven't taken the time to subscribe, please click the subscribe button underneath the video. If it's not the first time watching, thank you for coming back. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so because I do post on a regular basis and that way you'll get notified when my videos go live or when I go live on YouTube. All right, let's get started with the card. Okay, so here's my card, and I realize it's kind of not real easy to see with my lighting. Yeah, so the image on the video will be much better than that, as is the image that is posted as part of the blog hop. But I have used the Daisy Garden stamp set, which is this. It's a really nice background stamp, which I've got on my Stamparatus ready to go. So it's a really great background stamp. You can do all sorts of things with this image. I have also am using Pale Papaya as the color, and I'm going to pop it up or pop it a little bit with some black, which is kind of hard. So I've got black and then some of the black sparkle organdy ribbon. I think that's what it's all. No, glittered organdy ribbon in black. Just a little bit of ribbon to just kind of give it a nice pop. Okay, so I've got my supplies here. Let's see. Okay, I've got a piece of thick basic white cardstock that is cut 4 1/4 by 11. Now, all of the measurements will be on my blog, so if you miss them as I'm going through, you can find them. And then I've got a piece of basic black that is cut 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. That's the mat for the basic white. And then, actually this is gonna have a bigger mat because I've realized I've cut my piece. So this piece actually of basic white is cut 3 3/4 by 5. On my card, I actually cut it 4 by 5 1/4. So you can see this card's just going to have a bigger mat around it, which is okay because it'll pop even more. All right, so I've got my image on my Stamparatus, but I'm going to pull it off because the way you want to do this is put your piece of paper. I just find that using the Stamparatus works much better with these really big background images. I find the largest block really hard to handle. And so I tend to use my Stamparatus for the background. So you can put your paper down where you want it and then arrange your image over top of it and then press down to hold it in place. Now, I'm using Versamark because we're going to use some embossing powder. So you want to ink up your image with Versamark. Make sure you cover the whole image so that you get transferred. And then you can press down. Now, I also have made one of these little jars. So I took a jar that I got at the dollar store and one of these felt pads that they use for putting for your furniture on your hardwood so it doesn't scratch. And just putting that on the top just gives me something to press down hard with. It's just easier than using the palm of my hand. Now you want to make sure that you've got the ink transferred to your paper. So the great thing about the Stamparatus is that you can lift up your image and just make sure that it's covered. And if it isn't, put it back down because it's in exactly the same spot and do it again. Now, it's hard for you to see, but I actually am going to ink this up again and do it. I seem to, you want to make sure that you've got all of the spots covered on your stamped image so that the embossing powder will stick. So hopefully. There we go. Okay, we're going to assume that we've got it all covered now, and I'm just going to move my Stamparatus out of the way and bring my image back. Cover up my Versamark. Now I've got a piece, an old scrap of grid paper. Just going to bring that in. Move this out of the way, just so that I can sprinkle the embossing powder. I don't have all my embossing powder in containers. Probably would be a good idea, but then you can use a little spoon. But anyway, all right. So got embossing powder covering. Oh, that's good. All right, so my image is all good with embossing powder now. Let me see if I can do this without spilling this. I'm gonna try to pull it off away from the camera so I don't dump it. I really think I need to get some plastic containers to put my embossing powder in. That would be much better. Okay, so now bring my image back. Now this is gonna be hard for you to see. And find my heat tool, which managed to fall on the ground last night as I was using it. And it's all tangled. Here we go. Okay, so I've got my heat tool. This is going to get a little loud, apologies. So I'm going to try and talk over it. So when you're heat embossing, you want to hold your heat tool in place. You don't want to be doing this. You really want to hold it in place until you get one spot that has melted, and you will see the magic start to happen. So I'm just holding it in place until I see it start to go shiny, which I can now see. And you probably won't be able to see this until I start. But once you start to see one spot melt, you can then start to slowly move your heat tool around until the entire image is shiny. If you're still seeing it being matte and dull, that means that the embossing powder has not melted in that spot. So you can go back over it with your heat tool. And the other thing you should try to use is something other than your finger. So I'm going to use my take your pick tool to hold this in place because it is very hot and will burn your finger. So we're just moving this around. It is quite a large image, and so it does take a little bit of time. Once it starts to melt, it goes very quickly. Okay. Just be careful not to burn yourself when you're using the heat tool. You want to have this on. There are 2 heat settings on your heat tool, and you want to have it on the highest heat setting to make sure that you get it melting. Okay, there we go. I'll turn this off. Put that back. Now, you probably can't see this. I'm just going to leave this a minute. I don't know if you can see. There we go. So you can just kind of see my image and the shine. So I'm just going to let this just cool down a little bit before I start. So as I said, I'm using pale papaya. And I've got a blending brush. Now, I haven't washed this blending brush. When you do, that ink definitely comes out more than this. I should clean them a little bit more often than I do. But I do have different colors, so I try to keep, you know, my oranges and my reds, or my oranges and my yellows, to one heat, or one blending brush. These are amazing brushes. They look like they're foam, but this is just fine bristles, and they just are so easy to use. So you just want to start blending color, and it does take a little bit of time to start to get enough on here. And you can make this as dark or as light as you want. So I'm just kind of blending over. So you will start to see the color and the image pop. And you're just kind of, I've got my grid paper underneath here just so that you're not getting ink all over your workspace. So just keep taking your blending brush, picking up ink, going over your image. Once you get the whole image with some color behind it, you can start to go over certain parts of it to add in more color and some more dimension. Getting there, you can start to see the image start to appear. Got some nice color going in behind some of these. I really like it. It's not all the same. So you can use your blending brush to kind of focus on certain areas of your card. Now, where you have embossing powder, or you haven't had embossing powder, that resists the ink. And so you might get ink on your fingers. So when you go to put your card together, you probably want a baby wipe or something to wipe your fingers on. Otherwise, you could get ink on other parts of your card that you don't want it on. Ooh, I'm really liking how this is turning out. It's got some real depth in behind, and like I said, you can just start to see the color or the image emerge. Okay, I think I'm just going to do a little bit more in this corner, but I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. Okay, so that's the image. I'm just going to let that set for a minute. Now, let's take this away. Maybe you could see the image better if it's not on. Yeah, that makes it. The dark background helps. Embossing powder helps. Now, I'm going to bring in my trimmer, because I do like to use the scoring tool, scoring blade, to score my card base. So this is 4 1/4 by 11, and I'll score it at 5 1/2, so that it's easier to fold. You get a nice crisper fold if you actually score it before you try and fold it. And then use your bone folder to give it a nice crease. Okay. So as I said, my original card had, and what the measurements are on my blog are, the basic white was cut 4 inches by 5 1/4, and then the basic black was cut 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. But when I cut this, obviously I wasn't thinking. So my black is cut 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, which is correct. But my basic white is actually cut 3 3/4 by 5. So it'll have this card will have a wider mat than what my sample card is. So I'm just going to use Stamp and Seal. You could use whatever adhesive you like to use. Just make sure you put adhesive over a fair amount of the back. Because this was heat embossed, sometimes the cardstock can get a bit of a bend to it from the heat embossing. So I'm just going to give it a really good press down. Okay, and then this can just go onto your card base with whatever adhesive you like to use. Get it kind of even there. There we go. That. I don't know if you can see. I think you can see. This is actually quite darker, quite a bit darker than my sample, and I like it. I like it. All right, I'm using the hand penned petals, the Thanks stamp. I have used this so much, but I really like the font. And I'm using Memento, Tuxedo Black Memento. So I'm just going to stamp this kind of not in the middle and not all the way to one end, because I'm going to put I'm going to use my paper snips. Everything's going. Okay, paper snips to just put a little bit of a tag end in one end of my piece. So this piece is cut 1 inch by about 2.5, and then I've got a piece of basic black that is 1 1/4 by 3. Actually, it's probably, this white one was probably 1 inch by 2 3/4. And then I'm going to just adhere this on using my Stamp and Seal and line it up with the one end. So it's even on the one end and equal distance of top and bottom. And then you can take and use the white as your template, so that you can roughly get the tag end looking the same. Need to trim. There we go. You could use your the banners pick a punch as well, but I didn't grab that. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to just take, this is the glittered organdy ribbon, and I'm going to put a little bit of Stamp and Seal just to hold it in place. Now I want to tie kind of a nice size bow, so I'm going to leave myself lots of ribbon. So this may be more than I need, but I want to make sure that I give myself enough that I can tie a nice bow on the end. And just going to move it down a little bit. There we go. Okay. So see if I can do this. Kind of gave myself not very much on this one end. If you have trouble tying the bows, sometimes actually putting it onto your card and adhering it in place helps with that. Let's see if I can grab that. There we go. I think I've got it. There we go. Yeah, sometimes actually adhering it to your card before you try to tie your bow helps. I'm just gonna, there we go. Fussing with it a little bit. And on my ends. There we go. All right. Trim my tails a little bit. And then I'm going to take and pop this up using some dimensionals. when you've got a fairly wide sentiment piece, I tend to kind of stagger. So kind of go top and bottom for your dimensionals, not all straight down in a line down the middle, because that will just make it kind of wobble. And so if you stagger your dimensionals, put that on like that. There we go. So it's a little bit different looking than my sample, only because I cut my white base not quite the same size, but I really like how it turned out. And if I bring this up, you can see the dimension to it. So it's a bit darker in spots. It's just really pops that the daisy sentiment up. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that card. As all of the written instructions and measurements for the card are on my blog, and the link to my blog will be underneath this video, so you can go out and check it out. And if you have any questions, just leave a comment underneath the blog post or underneath this video, and I'm happy to help you make the card. I hope you enjoyed it. As I said, if you haven't taken the time to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please do so, because I do go live on a regular basis, and I also post videos on a regular basis. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll try out this technique. Happy stamping.